Okay, welcome back to another episode of BJCP Beer Reviews with Leo. Today I'm going to be looking at BJCP Style 7A Vienna Lager, and I'm going to be studying or using Devil's Backbone Vienna Lager as an example. This comes from Devil's Backbone Brewing Company in Virginia, I want to say. Yeah, Lexington, Virginia. So it's one of the best examples of the style, and it's because they are like one of those faux or fake craft breweries. Um, I guess they're kind of part of Big Beer, and so you can actually get a hold of them pretty much anywhere. So that's a plus. I don't like to always support Big Beer, but it's a really good beer actually, and it was easy to get a hold of. So. Our one sentence summary for the style is going to be a light bodied, bitter, malty amber lager with toasty complexity. And I'm actually going to do some style comparisons at the end, along with some of the styles. Like you'll see some images, and I did that just so that there's you can actually visualize some of the different styles, and we can do a good comparison. Okay, yeah, so with all that said, I'm just going to jump right into the beer review itself. So here goes. Cheers. Alright, so probably I'll show you some better photos of it, but this is actually a really pretty beer. I would say it's yeah, light red to copper in color. It's quite clear. I can see my fingers through it pretty well, even in this kind of lower lighting that is kind of nice for like a November evening. The head is quite nice. It starts quite thick and then it kind of dies down, but it regenerates. Generally pretty persistent, and yeah, I'd say like off-white. So in terms of appearance, I'm going to give this a 3 out of 3. Nothing to complain about there. Next up is the aroma, and yeah, I mean, I wasn't feeling so well today, but fortunately my nose is doing better, and it's very obvious to me that malt is going to be the driver in this beer, and yeah, a little bit of caramel type malt, but yeah, I guess some of that sort of Maillard character you get if you're like baking or cooking. A lot of those kind of bready, toasty notes. Yeah, I guess you'd also find this in a Scotch ale if you've ever had one of those. Or, I guess the most common would just be like a sort of amber ale if you're used to American craft beer. But obviously, as this is a lager, you can expect less yeast character, but still that same kind of malt bill. In my opinion, though, I think this comes through in the aroma. It's pretty obvious that they use quality malts. And for Vienna Lager, you're going to need a fair bit of Vienna Malt for the malt bill. I believe for the brewers out there, Vienna Malt has high enough diastatic power to self-convert, meaning you can use this for the bulk of your grain bill and still get, attenuation and conversion of your sugars. So that's always good to know. Not much in terms of a hoppy aroma or character. I would say I think that's okay for the style. It's really just that malt, Maillard, and a little bit of caramel that comes in. And it's really quite nice. So I'm gonna give that 11 out of 12, I think. In terms of the mouthfeel, yeah, it's surprisingly pretty thin, quite drinkable as a result of that. I guess I would say on the lighter side of medium. Um, but it's nice. It invites you to drink more like right away. And I think that again that like in terms of what the style is trying to achieve, it's a beer that's meant to be drank. It's not like something you sip over a long period of time. Um, very crushable in terms of sort of modern parlance. I do pick up a bit of creaminess, like you might find in maybe like a dry Irish stout, like a Guinness Draft, for example. Um, the carbonation isn't like overly harsh or anything, and that also aids in the drinkability. It lets the sweetness kind of come through, but there's like a sugary sweetness, and then there's like a malt sweetness. Um, and for me, it's a malt sweetness that comes through the sips. It's definitely apparent that the body is quite thin. It's super drinkable. I think the carbonation level is even a bit low, and I'll contrast it, for example, with Belgian beer, where that high carbonation and effervescence kind of cuts through really sharply and um, makes you kind of take your time a little bit more. This, like, I'm exhibiting great patience and not just like crushing this because it's very drinkable. So yeah, in terms of the mouthfeel, I think it's right on point in terms of what it's trying to achieve. I like the creaminess that's there. Yeah, I think ultimately it's a smooth drinking beer. So no complaints here. I think I'll give this a 5 out of 5. Next up would be flavor then. Now, it could be, like I said, I'm not feeling so well, so it could be that I'm not getting everything in terms of the flavor that I could be. Um, Compared to the aroma, I think the flavor is a bit lacking in terms of that malt intensity that I was expecting. It's relatively soft, I guess. It's not. Again, here I would contrast this with like a Scotch ale, where in a Scotch ale it's like that super malty in your face, almost. If you've ever when you're brewing and used malt extract, if you ever like lick your finger when you have malt extract on you, that's like a super intense maltiness. This is not that. Um, but especially if you're drinking a beer like a normal person and you're smelling it as you're drinking it, you're still gonna get the combination of the flavor through the aroma. You're gonna get that kind of beautiful balance and bouquet of malty aroma in the nose alongside the highly drinkable portion of the beer. And again, that really clean yeast character comes through. Not much to speak of there, I guess. Um, yeah, in fact, from the aroma, you might think that it would come across more caramelly. I guess that's what I was trying to say with the like Scotch ale or the malt extract analogies. Um, it's not caramelly, but it is malty. Um, if you ever had nice like homemade bread, I would say you get that breadiness, sort of what you pick up on in terms of the flavor. So overall, I guess the flavor is great, and I think it's right on point, but it's a little bit lacking in intensity for what I would like. Um, it does sort of have in the after palate a bit of what you would get like after eating a piece of bread. So again, quite bready, and maybe a little bit toasty. Yeah, like some of the kind of things you would get after eating a piece of toast. So I think it's what it's. I think it's a great example of the style, and I have a much better sense of what the style is trying to achieve by drinking this. This is like a really good example if you're trying to learn the style. Um, so yeah, I think the flavor intensity is a bit more toned back than my expectation would be, so I don't want to knock it harshly on that. So I'm going to give it a 15 out of 20. Then is the overall impression, and this is a score out of 10, and this is basically how good is the beer in terms of matching the style. Now, it's almost not worthwhile to do this for these sort of classic examples, but again, this is sort of a didactic process where I'm trying to learn what the flavors I should get, and not just the flavors, but the aroma and the body and everything. Um, and so this is a beer that should be like basically all the beers I do should get a 10 out of 10 on overall impression, I think, if they're a good example of the style, and this is definitely a good example. Yeah, actually, now that I think more about it, that breadiness kind of lingers on the tongue if you've had like a really nice piece of like fresh cut bread, sourdough maybe, or rye bread, leaves something on the tongue. It's a little not quite like sour or anything, but um, I guess that's what breadiness is, and it's actually a fun kind of challenge, trying in real time to think about how I would put words to flavor descriptors that I read about, and especially some of the less common malt terms that you know only people who really care about and think about malt a lot, like maltsters, would really have a good sense of these terms. Um, yeah, so I think I'm going to call it here and try and do some of those, talk through the style differences a little in a little bit, but yeah, I guess the overall impression I am going to give it a 10 out of 10. So we can do some quick math. 10, 30, 41. So 44 out of 50. A solid example of the style, and really the only place it lost points was flavor. I'm not sure if that's me wanting more flavor from it. I get a lot in the aroma, which is awesome, but on the palate, just a little bit more would really take it to like a perfect beer for me. Um, all right, thanks. I'll see you in the next part.
Okay, so I did a filter on the BJCP styles and found that there are actually 22 different amber-colored beers, which generally share a lot of the same characteristic flavors. Narrowing down, there are still 9 amber ales and 6 amber lagers, with category 7 including both. And in reviewing the descriptions of all of these styles, it is really just 2 other styles that have the most in common. Firstly, a more familiar style, Category 6A, Märzen, and secondly, Category 3C, Czech Amber Lager. Now, both of these beers should be more malty than Vienna Lager, with Märzen emphasizing Munich malt rather than Vienna, and the Czech lager being more biscuity and caramelly, as well as having more prominent Satzer hop character.